So my presentation for this week is on the marijuana sector. It involves the legal cultivation, production, marketing, and distribution of cannabis, cannabinoids, and or tobacco products. So there is an ETF for marijuana, and it's called the MJ ETF. It tracks market cap weighted index of global firms engaged in, as I said, the cultivation, production, marketing, distribution of cannabis products. So this is ETF MJ, and where it is at right now, it's highs of $40 per share, and now it's about $7 per share. And on the left side, you'll see the top 10 holdings of this ETF. Cannabis Growth Corporation, Tilray Brands, Kronos Group, etc. Sundell Growers. So it's obviously the marijuana sector in general it's quite low at the moment, and with all these different companies, basically if marijuana was like a tide, the cannabis industry was a tide, it would lift all these companies. It's like a rising tide that lifts all boats, as John F. Kennedy once quoted. So that also obviously includes in coins like crypto. If Bitcoin goes up, all other altcoins tend to go up. It's like a tide that lifts all boats. So, but this ETF MJ is the safest way that you would play, marijuana legalization, which will eventually happen in the US. It's already in the process of being legalized. And it's all about the waves and cycles, things going up and down. Ray Dalio, in his book The Principles, talks about cycles a lot, but he goes into details about cycles of recently he's been talking about the New World Order, where there's cycles of certain countries taking over as the most, the superpower, the strongest economy, or the strongest country. So, because in human nature, the rich tend to get a bit complacent, their kids get a bit more entitled, they become more mentally weak, and then the poor people who are more hungry, they overtake, and then the cycle continues. So in all of Ray Dalio's research, he has talked about how the Dutch used to be in power, and then it was the British, and then the US is now, and then the Chinese is gradually growing in power, and as a cycle. And he's saying that we're currently in the downtrend cycle of printing money and credit. And the next, he predicts through all his research in the past 500 years, is that there'll be a revolution and wars, which there is wars currently, but he's saying more of a civil war as well in the US. And then there's debt and political restructuring, and then a new world order where, a different country comes to the strongest country in the world, such as China. So and keeping on the concept of cycles, the human sentiment is a cycle. It's always a cycle of euphoria, and then it goes down to depression, capitulation, and back to optimism, and then back to euphoria, as we all know. So capitulation, depression is where there is the highest potential for earning. As Warren Buffett always says, we simply attempt to be fearful when others are greedy, when they're euphoric, and we want to be greedy when others are fearful, when the markets are in the capitulation or depression phase. And that's where the biggest earning potential is. So as you can see, the ETF, the general global marijuana industry, is at capitulation depression point at the moment. The previous euphoria was when it was at $40, and now it's at about $7. So this is the MJTF again. It's diversified against top 10 countries: United States, Canada, UK, Sweden, obviously mostly the United States. You can see top 10 sectors are in processing, consumer goods, health technology, finance, technology services. So it's kind of distributed around all these areas in the marijuana sector. So in relation to the energy sector, which I was in previously, because that was in a depression capitulation period, that's why I invested in the energy sector when it was about, as you said, see in the energy ETF here on the right side, it was about $28, and now it's about $90. So the reason I invest in energy, one of the reasons was because it was in that depression capitulation phase. So as Benjamin Graham says, you always want to have a margin of safety when you are investing. So you want to buy a security at a significant discount to its intrinsic value. So if you're looking at the left side, the energy sector here, the margin of safety, you had a lot of margin of safety. Like, it's not like nobody's going to use energy ever again. So the fact that it was at those low levels at that point, you know, in 2020, you have margin of safety. It's not like to fall to zero or as much as it's already fallen. So then you have the upside potential where Benjamin Graham would call the highest return opportunities, which it has kind of gone back up and kind of fulfilled that upside potential in the energy sector at least. And then, you know, bring that to the marijuana sector and the depression, personally, I would expect euphoric phase to come again. The previous euphoric phase was, 2017, 2019. Now it's a depression phase, and you do have a margin of safety in the whole cannabis industry if you believe, obviously, that cannabis is always going to be here to stay, and future legalization, etc. So you have upside potential, and that's why you want to invest in, depression periods. So DraftKings on the bottom right side is also in a depression period. It's one of the stocks that I think, Luke did a presentation on it, and he was quite optimistic about it. He quite liked the company. So right now would probably be the best time to invest in DraftKings because you've got a margin of safety. It's already fallen quite a lot, and you've got all upside potential if you believe in that company, for example. If you think people are going to continue gaming online, then it's a good company to invest right now because you have a margin of safety and a lot of upside potential. So they're staying on the concept of cycles, energy price cycles, oil price cycles. You see that oil was once at $20 in the 1950s. It went up to $140 per barrel in 1980. It went back down to $20 in 2000. Went back up to $180 in 2008, went down to $20 in 2020, and then it went back up to $100 as the cycles just keep repeating in energy and in oil. So it's pretty predictable in a way. As long as you believe that people are going to continue to use oil and energy, for example. So if you look on the left, bottom right, you'll see North American Marijuana Index, and it's had its own cycles. It was in 2017, it was $100 for this index, and then it went up to $300, and now it's back down to $100. So it's at a depression cycle right now. So what you have to think is, will such a product or service continue in existence, or will it disappear? Will people continue to use oil energy? Will people continue to use cannabis? Will space travel ever continue to exist in the future? Will Bezos, with his Blue Origin company, Musk, SpaceX, Branson, and Virgin Galactic, all these richest people in the world seem to think that space travel will exist in the future. So this is just an example of the cycles in all these different products and commodities and services. So Virgin Galactic Holdings, you can see if you look in the top left that it was about $10 in 2019. It went up to $60, and now it's at $10 again. So you have to think, like, will people want to do will space travel exist in the future? With technology improving, will people want to travel to space? Is that the next frontier? So that should make your decision if whether you want to invest or not. But you probably didn't want to invest when it was at $60. If you're wanting to invest in space, you'd wait for the depression capitulation periods. That's where you get the highest return opportunities. And I talked about in the group about cotton and silk, which are also commodities, soybeans. And you'll see on the charts on the top right here that soybeans had its cycles, 600 up to 1200, back to 800, back to 1600. Is people going to continue using soybeans, for example? Are people going to continue using cotton? Are people going to continue using these commodities when they're at the depressions? You have to think of these questions and whether you think it's a good opportunity to invest in it or not. And most likely, people are going to continue using such commodities. So in the right side, there's the Bitcoin cycle, which I'm going to go into the next slide. So you see the cycle in Bitcoin 2011 to 2012. It was at $2. It went up to $30, and then it's back to $2. Then 2013 2014, it was at $20, went to $200, back to $40, and then 2014 15. So Bitcoin has cycles of ups and downs. And what you have to think about Bitcoin, well, it's deflationary. That's why the price keeps going up. As long as we have inflation, Bitcoin will have deflation. Will deflate, and the price will go up. So the questions I think you have to think in terms of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is, will the Fed keep printing money, which causes inflation? Will there continue to be bailouts? Will the government continue to be inefficient with money? Will there continue to be pension funds? Because the S&P 500, a lot of pension funds, large majority of pension funds are in indexes like the S&P 500. So it's like, if that's going to crash, then a lot of people are going to lose all their pension. They're not going to be able to pay out pensions. So that's why they keep having to print money, save the economy, print money. Inflation happens. And do you think the government will always have our best interests at heart? So will people always want something not controlled by the government, like Bitcoin? Will people always want alternative countries, some sort of safety? Because of all these hyperinflation events, like in Germany in 1921, Hungary 1945, Yugoslavia 1992, Zimbabwe 2007, these governments printing loads and loads of money causing hyperinflation. Do you think this will continue? And that's where if you think Bitcoin will, or cryptocurrencies are safe alternative investments because of all these government inefficiencies. So, as you all know, the purchasing power of a dollar due to inflation has gone down a lot. In 1635, it was your purchasing power of a dollar has gone down about 80% ish. And the example of all this printing money causes inflation, so each dollar is worth less. So then Zimbabwe has this $100 trillion currency note, and then Philippines has a 100,000 note, and then Venezuela has this $500 million note. It's basically not worth as much as it used to because they kept printing money, and it's been going on since 1635. And your purchasing power just keeps decreasing because you're in dollars or currency. So this is a cycle for gambling. Like Las Vegas Sands Corp is a casino, and so what you have to think is, when Las Vegas Sands Corp was at its depression and capitulation at $2, you have to think, will people continue to gamble? They've been gambling for centuries, for a very long time. So that's what Derek thought. He thought people continue to gamble. I think he was in Las Vegas at the time, and he saw that they seemed to be doing pretty well. People were still gambling, and that's why Derek invested in Las Vegas Sands in 2008, and then the cycle went back to euphoria, and now it's kind of back down to the middle, near, obviously not depression capitulation yet, but it's had its cycle of up and down, euphoria and depression. So we're going back to cannabis. Like, will people continue to use cannabis in the future? Well, it seems like a lot of people like cannabis. There's all these queues, and in Canada there was shortages because Canada, when legalized marijuana, everybody was trying to buy some. And then on the right side, you see a Dutch cafe closure spark panic buying of pot. And then, bottom right here, Dutch are queuing up to buy weed as Netherlands faces coronavirus lockdown. So everybody's queuing up for all this marijuana. It doesn't seem like it's something that's going away anytime soon, especially with legalization around the corner. It doesn't seem like it's going to disappear, And these are further news headlines of people queuing for marijuana and cannabis, basically. Seems the Dutch are particularly fond of cannabis, but also the Canadians love it as well. In the top left, Nevada celebrates newly legalized marijuana with fireworks, weed-themed weddings, and long queues. So around the world, people seem to like cannabis. Now, look, what does marijuana help with? Well, it helps to reduce anxiety as one of the main benefits. Also helps a lot of medicinal uses like reducing inflammation, controlling nausea, killing cancer cells. It says here, relaxing tight muscles in people with MS. And with the world going, depression rates and anxiety rates going higher and higher, the top left shows depression rates increasing over time, and then the bottom left shows average daily suicide rates increasing over time, from 2000 to 2021, especially during the pandemic. There's so much anxiety, people stuck at home, and all this depression. Marijuana kind of helps reduce that, right? So it helps. People probably want to try it, and that might help with their anxiety. So this is just the cycles again about principles from Ray Dalio. Talk about cycles. So I wanted to talk specifically about a cannabis company called Hexocorp, which is currently a leading producer of high quality cannabis products in Canada. So this is a website for Hexocorp. As you can see, they won a lot of awards. The Master Grower of the Year, their Innovative Product of the Year, Ad Campaign of the Year. So they're a very established cannabis grower, and they have their own brands, and they white label. They make products for other people as well. So Hexo is their strategy and game plan. They've recently acquired a lot of companies, cannabis product and companies such as Redecan, Trail Mix, Bake Sale. Their strategy currently is acquiring a portfolio of cannabis-related companies and products, and they've really spent a lot of money acquiring all these brands. So you can see here their recent transaction of Redecan, which is a really big company. They acquired them for $925 million in 2021, and they want to look to be, they want to be a leader in the Canadian cannabis industry. They're looking towards being the top 3 global cannabis product companies in the world. So Redecan was on the right side here. You'll see it used to be owned by Grand River Enterprises, which is a very wealthy empire family, and they sold Redecan to Hexo. So basically, Hexo acquired Redecan and the manufacturing technology for about $1 billion in 2021. And they're also partnered with some big players too. They've got support from big companies like Tilray, and amidst the market sell-off, all the depression, the capitulation, they were only valued at 130 million today, which is really, I feel is very undervalued, especially if they recently acquired Redecan and all their technology for almost $1 billion. And they're like number 1 in Canada for marijuana sales. You can see here that Hexocorp is at the top of the total volume traded in the markets. This is the 24-hour volume. They're the top most volume company. And the right side is just a picture of Redecan Reddies, which is a pre-rolled cannabis high quality product from Redecan. Retail is about $11. The cost of goods of this is about $4, so pretty good margins as well. As you can see in this chart, Hexo and Redecan are one of the leading and defensible combined market share position in the Canadian market compared to all these other companies that are selling in Canada, such as Tilray, Canopy Growth, Village Farms, Aurora. So they're basically the top sellers. And you can see here in April of 2022 on the left side, Hexo and Tilray were the top sellers. They made $33 million of revenue in April alone. And that's not including figures from their Molson Coors partnership, where they partner with Molson Coors of the US, where they brought out these cannabis-related beverages, where they launched 5 new brands. So that's not including those sales. So they're doing pretty well. So Molson Coors, I don't know if you guys know them, but they're a pretty big company. They do Coors Lights, the beer. They do annual revenue of like $10 billion. They're on the London Stock Exchange. Pretty big company. They're headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. I think you should know them. I think you do know Molson Coors. So they partner with Hexo to bring out a CBD cannabis beverage. So Hexo they also want to grow and expand to ready-to-eat edibles. If you look at the top left screenshot here, you'll see that they want to do more than just cookies. It's also like granola bars and other food products. So they have a CPG partner, but that's not yet named. But it's someone who's on the same level as Molson Coors. and it's a Fortune 200 company. And people are rumoring that it could be Kellogg's or Pepsi. A CPG is basically a consumer packaged goods company that helps with distribution around the world. So on the right side, you'll see that Tilray Brands is currently the only supplier of edibles, ready-to-eat edibles. Their product called the Soleil Bites infused with CBD, and you see here that Tilray announced a purchase of 211 million of Hexo debt in exchange for opportunity to become a major shareholder. So they want to partner with their competitor in order to corner the market, because they're the top two biggest sellers of cannabis in Canada, and they do pretty well in the US as well, especially Tilray. And so they want to collaborate, and this partnership should enable them to achieve savings of $80 million over the next 2 years. So Hexo is going to produce some of Tilray's products because they're a grower, they're a manufacturing company, and they do white label for US companies like Tilray. On the left side, you'll see Kellogg, Pepsi, and other major brands. They're asking Congress to stop marijuana-infused copycat foods. So a lot of people are copying them, and they're basically suing them, telling Congress to stop these copycats because they want to be the main people in the market. So you can see PepsiCo, they launched a Rockstar in hemp in Germany because Germany legalized cannabis. So that's where the name partnership rumors come, that Hexo is partnered with Kellogg's or Pepsi, because these are the two main people at the moment worldwide that are doing this, cannabis infused beverages and foods. So Germany was one of the countries to legalize cannabis, and then Malta in Europe, and that's why they launched this Rockstar energy and hemp drink in Germany. So I don't know if you guys have tried that. So you can see here on the left side, as I showed before, Hexo and Tilray were the top sellers, both around $30 million just in April 2022. And on the right side, you'll see their earnings, Hexo earnings. So in March 18th, 2022, they missed earnings by about 6 million. They got 52 million revenue. They're forecasted at 58 million, but in June 15th, they're forecasted 52 million. So it's every quarter, so every 4 months. And if they did in October 33 million sales, I'm pretty sure they're going to beat their earnings in June the 15th. So that would most likely be a beat. And when that comes published, it's pretty likely that Hexo will increase in share price. I mean, they did 33 million and 33.698 million in 1 month. So other 3 months, I'm sure they'll probably beat that. So you'll see on the left side, Tilray Brands attempted to buy Hexo for up to $3 per share in November, but it was rejected. Now, $3 per share is about $1 billion, so they were trying to buy them for $1 billion. But they ended up settling to buy their debt instead. So in the right side, you'll see that Tilray ended up buying $211 million of convertible notes instead, because their offer was rejected. Like, Hexo didn't want to sell to Tilray for $1 billion for $3 per share. So in November, their share price was about $2, and they were offered $3 per share but they refused to sell, basically, and they adopted the poison pill strategy where they diluted their shares to make it difficult for Tilray to buy them out. And is it surprising that they didn't sell to Tilray for $1 billion? The Redican acquisition was about $1 billion. So why didn't Hexo sell to Tilray for $1 billion in 2021? Well, they're valued at 130 million right now. So why did they adopt the poison pill strategy and dilute their shares instead? Well, because they believe their value is more. Their share price was $13 in February 2021. So it makes sense that they want to sell. I was just recently reading a book, 0 to 1, from Peter Thiel, and it talks about companies selling. So it basically says, when a big company makes an offer to acquire a successful startup, always offers too much or too little. Founders only sell when they have no more concrete visions for the company, in which case the acquirer probably overpaid. Definite founders with robust plans don't sell, which means the offer wasn't high enough. So when Yahoo offered Facebook to buy them out for $1 billion in 2006, Mark Zuckerberg said that there's no way they're selling. They're obviously not going to sell here because Mark saw where he could take the company, but Yahoo didn't. So a business with a good definite plan will always be underrated in a world where people see the future as random. So I thought that was quite interesting, and it kind of tied in with this presentation I was doing today. I was just reading this book and this came up. So this is just Tilray buying on the news buying 211 million of Hexo debt. If they convert this note, they'll own 37% of Hexo. And it says at the bottom that Tilray expects this deal to create 50 million in cost savings. I think they said 80 million over 2 years, but in 1 year, about 50 million in initially. So you're probably a bit surprised. I feel surprised to see that Hexo was down so much, but it was a combination of a lot of things that led to this capitulation, this depression. Through the market sell-off from the increase in interest rates, the marijuana legislation delay in 2021. They thought they were going to legalize it in 2021, but it ended up being delayed, and now they're thinking of doing it. It's possibly to legalize in 2022, late this year. So they took on a lot of debt. They bought Redican for $1 billion and took on a lot of debt. That reduced their share price, and they diluted their shares because of adopting the poison pill strategy to stop Tilray from buying them out. So they've been under all this stress, all these issues. But the assets are still there. The technology, their assets of growing the marijuana, their distribution, their partnerships, all those assets are still there. So I feel like it's worth more than 100 million valuation, which it currently is. I think the high it was at $40, and right now it's. So you can see the cycle here happening. In 2007, it was $5. It went up to $40, and then it went back down to about, it's down to 0.33, which is really, really low. But so you might think that they're going bankrupt, but they've got a lot of funds, a lot of support, and also Tilray. I'll explain later on how much money they actually have left, how much money they have. And Tilray recently gave them 200 million to acquire some of their debt. So, and they're making cost savings as well. So they're not going bankrupt anytime soon. So nowadays, companies in the same industries tend to help each other, it seems, as it helps the industry grow overall. On the left side, you'll see that Apple was on the brink of bankruptcy in 1997, but Bill Gates actually stepped in and invested 150 million in Apple and actually saved Apple from bankruptcy. And at the bottom, it says Steve Jobs was saying, "Thank you to Bill. The world's a better place." And on the right side, you'll see that Blockbuster could have, bought Netflix for 50 million. If they just worked together, they could have taken the industry together, but they didn't, So Blockbuster ended up going bankrupt, and then Netflix overtook them. But I think it's very helpful for companies to come together and support each other in the same industry if they can. And they save costs and they both reap the benefits. So just about Hexo's plan forward. So they basically want to be, they have a goal of becoming the first amongst all the companies to be cash flow positive from its operations. So right now, a lot of cannabis companies are not cash flow positive, as you might know. So they're basically setting themselves up for success in the future when cannabis legalizes, which they expect will do. It was already delayed in 2021, but it should do in 2022. But they're acquiring all these brands, partnering with all these brands, in order to prepare themselves to really take off when legalization happens. So yeah, basically preparing themselves for distribution when marijuana becomes hot again. Now, Hexo it's a really good company. I mean, it's number one in Canada market share. It's number one overproducer all categories in Ontario and Alberta. It's number one pre-roll producer in Canada, number one beverage producer in Canada, number one capsule producer in Canada, #1 oil producer in Canada. So they make pretty good products. They make really good products, and they sell the most as well. So the main fear around Hexo is that they think, especially from the Redican acquisition for $1 billion, that they're going to go bankrupt because they took on all this debt to acquire Redican. The 925 million. So if you look at the bottom here, so far this year, Hexo has purchased Cannabis Global, 48 North, Redican. So they're acquiring all these companies, buying all these companies, and their strategy is acquisition of cannabis brands, even if it means going to debt. They acquired Redican's technology for close to $1 billion, and yet they're now in June 2022 they're valued only 130 million and missed the global market sell-off. Tilray tried to buy them out, but they rejected, and they ended up paying them 200 million to buy their debt instead. So the main problem everyone is fearful of Hexo is that they're going to go bankrupt from all this debt. This guy Scott Willis is, saying Hexo's either going big or going home. So he thinks in 2 years they'll either go bankrupt or be the #1 winner in pots. So will they go bankrupt? I think that's the main question everyone wants to know, with all this debt. If you look at the left bottom here, so Hexo had 127 million shares as of March, up 100% from a year ago, so they diluted their shares to raise some cash. Between Redican and 48 North and convertible debt, a recent filing to issue more stock, so that they're diluting a lot. They've diluted a lot, I mean. Right, so next slide is, so that's just what I showed before about Tilray buying their debt, giving them more money to stay afloat, and then if they convert those notes, they'll own 37% of Hexo. And this deal, this synergy is expected to create 50 million in cost savings. So if you look at the bottom here where I've highlighted, so Hexo's financial condition is positioned to be significantly strengthened by the proposed restructuring of debt, allowing for access to approximately 282 million in cash. They've also got 102 million in unrestricted cash, and they've got 180 million through an equity backstop commitment from a venture capital firm called Callus Capital and Partners. And also it says at the bottom, achieved international sales growth of 36% from Q1 and a total of 312% sales growth from 2021. So including the international sales from Cannabis, comprising 54% of quarter's net sales, which grew. Overall, it's basically grown 90% quarter over quarter. So it's growing a lot, selling a lot, and yet the share price is just so low right now. Through all these things that I've mentioned, that's why. But they've got tons of cash that they can use to stay afloat until things get better as they keep growing. I'm pretty sure they're very close to turning profitable and, beyond. Just Tilray tried to buy them for $1 billion in November 2021. So they obviously see value in Hexo and their assets. They think that their assets are worth a lot. They're definitely worth more than 100 million, their assets, if they went bankrupt, if they liquidated. That was the video, but I don't know if you can hear it. I posted that video earlier. Hopefully you saw it, but it basically talks about Tilray's and what they thought of Hexo and why they bought their debt, things like that. They just basically believe in the synergies. So this is the consolidated statements. I went through this with Nadav, and so if you look at the main things here, so from 2020 to 2021, the revenue's grown 57%, and as we mentioned earlier, they were growing quite a lot, quarter over quarter. The net revenue from sale of goods is 123 million, and their cost of goods sold is 94 million, which overall it gives them a gross profit there of 48 million. But at the bottom, you'll see they're actually making a net loss of 113 million overall because of operating costs and things like that. And they kind of need they basically need to do 3 times the revenue or profit in order to make a profit. And by doing that, they need to this was only in July 31st. This was before the acquisition of their debt from Tilray, before the cost savings of $50 to $80 million over 2 years. So it's before all of that, because this is just the latest publication of the financial statements. So you can see in 2020, they had a loss of 546 million in 2020, but they're only losing 113 million this year, 2021. Oh, sorry, last year. So they're actually doing pretty well. At least since 2020, they've recovered quite a bit, and they're on a trajectory of profiting probably in the next couple of years. This is the consolidated statements of financial position of their assets. So the main numbers here, they've got 135 million in inventory. Their property, plant, equipment is about 400 million. Goodwill, 88 million. I think that's related to acquisition of brands. So you can see that the other red circle is the senior secured convertible note, which is the money that's basically part of that is from the Tilray buying their debt for around 200 million. So converted note, it owns about 37% of their company. So at the bottom, you see total equity attributable to shareholders of Hexocorp is about 730 million. Now, if they're only valued at 130 million right now, and if Tilray bought 211 million of Hexo shares, if Hexo did go bankrupt and dissolved and liquidated, you'd probably be able to get at least 700 million out of the company from their assets and things. So I just don't see how they are only worth 100 million today. And they've also, not to mention, they've got all that cash, as I mentioned earlier, that they have in the bank, which I mentioned earlier, 102 million unrestricted cash, 282 million in cash, 180 million through a backstop commitment from Cal's Capital, and they're continually growing in growth every quarter. So you see, this is just an example of Constellation Brands, which is a venture capital firm. They're investing in Canopy Growth, which is a competitor. So there's a lot of private equity firms investing in, or a lot of companies, big companies investing in the cannabis space. These guys, Constellation Brands, investing $5 billion into Canopy Growth. So this here is just a product from Hexo and Molson Coors partnership. Their brand is, one of their is Trust CBD, which is basically the beverage, CBD of beverage. And then the right bottom side, you'll see Coca-Cola partners with Molson Coors to launch the Chico Hard Seltzer. So Molson Coors is part of Coca-Cola as well in distributing their products. So they're basically well connected, right? Molson Coors connected to Coca-Cola, connected to Hexo. It seems like they're pretty well supported, Hexo. So CBD infused seltzers, Molson Coors and Hexo partnership. So they want to do a CBD infused seltzer basically, and it could be distributed by Coca-Cola. I don't know. They've not kind of named who their partner is, their consumer packaged goods partner. But once cannabis becomes legalized in more US states, Molson Coors and Hexo CBD Seltzer has most chance for distribution partnership deal with Coca-Cola, as they're currently working with them with the hard seltzer products already. So they have their distribution channels. I think that strategy is prepared. They're prepared for that. Whatever happens, legalization, they have distribution networks to really, explode. So there's difference between LPs, which are Canadian licensed producers, and then there's MSOs, which are multi-state operators, which are like Tilray in the US. Now, the reason that these guys partner up, MSOs in the US and then with LPs in Canada, is because marijuana costs a lot cheaper to produce in Canada than it does in the US. So generally, you can buy weed in Canada for $5, but in the US it costs $12 to $15. And a lot of people in the US just buy online weed products from Canada. So in the bottom right, you'll see one reason that Canada marijuana is cheaper is because by design, part of the Cannabis Act was to reduce the black market around the drug, and the best way to do this was to offer competitive pricing. But that's not the only reason. Another reason that Canadian weed is cheaper is because they're paying less because there's just more marijuana in Canada. And Canada's history of medical marijuana has helped to ensure it's prepared for recreational use. Though there are reports of shortage, this means price may change soon. But in the US, while demand for cannabis might be high, the supply is lower, so leading to higher costs for consumers. So by partnering with LPs like Hexo in Canada, they can reduce their costs by quite a lot, their cost of goods by quite a lot, because it's about 50% cheaper or more cheaper the weed in Canada. So this one says, ruling by 29 states and cannabis is an essential service. The declaration reinvigorated the cannabis industry and awakened investors' high demand for the commodity. Such inelastic demand is similar to alcohol or tobacco. No matter the change in price, people will still want marijuana. So stimulus checks were distributed around America. People cashed out and headed to a local weed shop, resulting in the largest one-day cannabis sales days. And as lockdowns ended around June, the demand kept growing month over month for cannabis state over state. So as elections rolled around, we're not only received future promises of deprohibition reform, but 5 states already legalized, perhaps the most significant being New Jersey. It's seen as a domino state, as the surrounding areas could follow suit. We're also seeing this occur in New York and Maryland, and the demand will only grow as more significant proportion of the US population comes online to buy cannabis legally. So with these events, US MSOs have extremely attractive valuations, especially compared to growth sectors like tech, which are trading at significantly higher valuations. So this is in the 25th of March. I made a post that they were moving along the process of decriminalization and legalization of marijuana at a federal level in the US, and they're definitely making progress. So especially this year, they were supposed to do it last year, but they delayed. So the cannabis market in the US is currently about 10 billion, it says, but it's projected to, that was in 2018, sorry. So it's projected to reach 97 billion by 2026, exhibiting an annual growth rate of 32%. So it's projected to grow by quite a lot, the cannabis industry. Seems that, at the bottom, it says, with 10 newly legalized states slated to begin selling cannabis in 21-22, the legal market is projected to pull in 43 billion. So in 2018, it was 10 billion, and in 2021-22, it's already 43 billion. So it seems to be on point. Projection seems somewhat accurate. So the House passed a bill to legalize marijuana. What's next? So the next phase is basically, so while most states have legalized it for recreational and medical purposes, it's still illegal at a federal level. But it's a move that is overwhelming popular among Americans. An April 2021 poll from Pew Research found that 91% of US adults think marijuana should be legal, either medically or recreationally, or both at the federal level. And while the vote would open the door to radically change how weed is used in the US, it's expected to reach hurdles in the Senate. So that makes sense of why people are very uncertain about marijuana sector at the moment. Well, that's causing the depression, capitulation, all these things come together to really depress the industry at the moment. But yeah, it shows a lot of future promise. So if you look at the right, these are all the states that are legalized for medical use, not legalized, and then recreational medical use. And so they're not all legalized, all the states, just some of them. And in the right-hand side at the bottom, it says Democratic senators leading a push to legalize marijuana say they are now on track to introduce legislation before recess in August this year. So after initially announcing plans to file a comprehensive reform bill later this month, so it is delayed until August. Senate Majority Leader heading the effort said in a statement Thursday that he's proud of the progress senators have made, bringing this vital bill closer to its official introduction before the recess in early August. So Schumer said the bill, dubbed the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, will remove cannabis from federal list of controlled substances and help repair our criminal justice system, ensure restorative justice, protect public health, implement responsible tax and regulations. The main thing at the top left is that, currently there are a lot of cannabis companies are barred from accessing financial services. They're unable to obtain loans or bank accounts, and that's a really big hurdle. But once this is all done, decriminalization, legalization, cannabis companies are really able to expand and grow once this glass ceiling is taken off. So the main question you might be asking is, if US legalizes cannabis, does it even benefit Canadian cannabis companies like Hexo? Because surely the US will prioritize US companies and put an import tax on foreign cannabis products, which would be a disadvantage to Hexo. But as we've already mentioned before, a lot of American companies are already partnered with Canadian licensed producers for reasons I've stated before, cheaper to produce. Hex was already selling products in the US in 17 states through their partnerships with Molson Coors, for example. And the range will include seltzers, ciders, wines, aperitifs, ready-to-drink canned cocktails, and more CBD-related products like granola bars, foods, and stuff like that. They're also making products for Tilray, which is a top US marijuana company. So legalization will regulate such products like alcohol is regulated, which will open the floodgates. Hexo is in one of the best positions to take advantage when this eventually happens. So the hype alone from the US legalization this year, late this year to next year, will probably be the tide that lifts all, the wave that lifts all boats. Sorry, I think I'm getting confused there. The tide that lifts all boats in marijuana stocks. So LPs like Hexo are also on the NASDAQ, so they have access to major capital that's available. Let's see. So, okay, so this is just showing the ETF is at current depression levels, capitulation levels. Previously at euphoric levels, it was at $40 in 2018, 2019. Basically going up and down as per cycles, as per human sentiment, which is quite, just an example to energy sector. It has its own cycles, up and downs, as it had its capitulation in 2020. So ETFMG is the easiest way to play this sector, to play this depression. These are top 10 holdings, and these are how it's diversified amongst 10 different countries, 10 different sectors. Oh, sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear this. I have a recording from Derek where I uploaded it earlier on. He mentioned his friend was in the cannabis industry and who was making 8 figures that time, and he was offered $1 billion for his marijuana company. That was in, I don't know when that was, probably 2018, 2019 at the highs. So now it's at the lows. So, but basically, there was a lot of money to be made in marijuana at that time, and now it's at the depression capitulation levels. So the cannabis industry has been caught in the crossfires amidst the market indiscriminate sell-off this year. A lot of cannabis stocks are heavily beaten down, and I believe many of them have become undervalued. The cannabis industry has gone through many cycles of up and downs already, but the current all-time lows, there is very likely to be a reversal in the near future, especially once the US passes the bill to decriminalize marijuana and legalize it in all states. Everyone is preparing for this. Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, Tilray, Hexo, they're all acquiring brands left and right, all partnering up to corner the market to take the most advantage of this wave. So you don't need to start your own weed business like Chris Bear in the mastermind. Like, he has a weed business, as we all know, and he's doing very well, it seems. His last post was in 2021 saying it was making, about 100,000. I don't know if that's a month. I think it was a month he was making about 200,000 revenue. But so you don't need to start a business like Chris. You can just invest in ETF marijuana, and that will give you exposure to the cannabis marijuana sector if you want to try and ride this tide. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have questions, we can discuss it.